Hello and welcome to another episode of the TNC Podcast. It was a brilliant episode last time. We had Darren Eadie on, Norwich City legend. And to be honest with you, I'm pretty shocked that I've actually managed to get this guy on for you guys today. Former under-18 and under-21 England international goalkeeper, shot stopper for Bournemouth, Gillingham, Wolves, Coventry, Villa and Millwall, current goalkeeper coach at Charlton Athletic, 195 Norwich City appearances, 2001 Norwich City Player of the Season, and 53 appearances for Ipswich Town. Ladies and gents, welcome to the Talk Norwich City podcast, Andy Marshall. Andy, first of all, thanks so much for coming on. You didn't have to do this, and I'm so excited to get into it. How are you?
Thanks, Chris. No, I'm very good, thank you. And it seems an appropriate time to maybe have a chat with some of the Norwich fans and through these very, very strange circumstances and times that we're going through. Maybe try and lighten the mood a little bit if I don't get too many boos.
Believe me, Andy, there'll be plenty of banter on this podcast. I'm not going to keep you safe from that, sir. Let's take you back right to the beginning of your time at Norwich, if that's okay, because you were actually a trainee with us, weren't you? You were born in Bury, and then you kind of fled Bury to come to sunny Norfolk. What was that like, and how did that move come about? How did you end up in Norwich?
Yeah, it was actually Bury, Manchester that I was born, and I was brought up in Cambridgeshire. I was spotted at the age of 10 playing from oh, there you go, Chris. There's my dog. He's already started. Just as we start the interview, my dog kicks in. No, at the age of 10, I was spotted by Norwich, and I went on trial, and I went on a 3-week trial actually with Norwich over to Finland because I don't think they needed. I think they needed a goalkeeper to go in a tournament over there. And I ended up going for 3 weeks and impressed enough to be offered to come back. And it went from there. And between 10 and 14, I was taken on. And then from 14 to 16, I was given another 2-year contract at Norwich City. And at the age of 16, I was offered full-time apprenticeship. Which meant me moving over from my home where I lived with my parents, and moving over to Norwich and spending the next 2 years plying my trade and learning how to become a professional footballer.
What year was that, Andy? Was that the late 80s?
I'm not that bloody old.
I've started already.
Well, it would have been in the 80s when I was first spotted for Norwich, but no, okay. not when I joined. Do you want me to stay on this podcast?
Andy, let's go now. Let's move the time forwards quite a bit, actually. Let's go to 94, the 27th of December. Exactly. You made your debut. You were actually a sub goalie that day. You came on for the legendary Bryan Gunn. What was your emotion running onto the pitch at Carrow Road at that time?
Well, it was at the City Ground in Nottingham.
Of course,
Nottingham Forest live on Sky, and I'd spent most of the season or the first half of the season as a substitute. Unfortunately, Gunny had a horrendous injury. I remember it clearly after 7 minutes, and I thought, this is it. This is my time, and it was very daunting. I remember very clearly a Nottingham Forest fan, as I'm warming up and getting ready to go on, standing behind me, shouting at me, "Big Stan's coming to get you. Don't worry, Marsh." And I was, 19 years old. I was bricking it, quite frankly. Yeah. And you've got Big Stan Collymore, 6'3", huge athlete, a proper monster of a man. And I'm thinking, crap, what's going to happen? So, I went on, and the game went exceptionally well. We lost 1-0. And I think it forced John Dean's hand into playing me in the next game, which was the Newcastle game at home, where, again, it went very well. We won 2-1. I conceded a penalty. But I was fortunate enough to get man of the match that game. So I think it's there was probably a lot of things I did very, very wrong, to be honest, Chris. And it was one of them. I was riding the crest of the wave. Everything went my way. The balls were dropping how they needed to, and they were coming off the post and landing in my arms. And it was a bizarre set of circumstances. But now I've come to what we class in football terms as the dark side as a coach. You realise I was never ready for this. I was never, ever ready for it. I was a million miles off if you compare where I should be to what I try and train our goalkeepers and what many goalkeepers are trained up and down the country.
Mentally or technically?
Both.
Wow.
Definitely mentally know when they're good enough, and technically know when they're good enough. And you can say that, and the football's moved on. The game of football's moved on drastically for the better.
Yeah.
But we had no goalkeeper coaches back in them days, and Bryan Gunn was our goalkeeper coach, and all of a sudden he's now injured.
Yeah.
So he would be the first team goalkeeper, the goalkeeper coach, and I've lost both all in one go.
And the exact reason, Andy, why I thought it was at Carrow Road is that I actually spoke to Norwich City legend Bryan Gunn before this podcast, and he told me a story about that game at Carrow Road. And I'm going to play you Gunny's voice message to me that he sent today.
That I was in the Norwich with my ankle. And I think it was the game against Newcastle. Andy Marshall couldn't do anything wrong. It was shot hitting off the post and back into his hands. He's pulling off world-class saves. Everything went right. They beat Newcastle 2-1. Anyway, it was the first day of Radio Canary, and Robert Chase had taken me up a fruit bowl and a hat with earphones in it. And I think I listened to the game on Radio Norfolk that day. And then after that, Andy was interviewed by Roy Waller, the great Roy Waller, and he said, have you got a message from Bryan Gunn, who's obviously up in the Norfolk and Norwich? He said, yeah, Gunny, I hope you're happy. I've won you a bonus today. And I was nearly jumping out of my bed to get down to Carrow Road to give him a little clip around the ear. But no, thanks a lot for that, Marsh. You won me a bonus, even though I was in my hospital bed. Great lad, great goalkeeper, had a great career, and someone that still obviously speak to in the game. He's doing well with his coaching at Charlton at the moment, so hopefully he'll go on to bigger and better things with the manager or another manager in the future. So send him my best wishes, Chris. Thank you. Bye.
There you go. Bryan Gunn sends a message and shares a story. Andy, what do you remember of that game?
He never shared the win bonus with me.
No.
No, I'm joking. No, it was... yeah, listen, that's very kind of Gunny to say what he's just said there, and we have a very good relationship, me and Bryan, and we've always stayed in contact when we've both gone our separate ways from Norwich. And you know, the man taught me a lot, and what Bryan taught me was not only how to be a good goalkeeper, but how to be dignified in how you did it. And you know, the way he conducted himself, the way he's conducted himself through his whole professional career, not only in football, but just generally as a professional person. He is a role model and a very good friend of mine. So it's very kind of you to play that, because it was great to hear. But yeah, the game itself, it was a big blur, to be honest, and it really was. You know, there's only a couple of instances that I remember within the game. But it was one of them unique situations. You make your home debut, full capacity at Carrow Road. We're playing Newcastle, and Newcastle were flying high, and Rule Fox came back. I think it was one of the first times Foxy had come back as well. And yeah, I had a decent game, and I rode my luck. Let's put it that way. But many things went right as well.
You know what, Andy? I was actually going to say to you, I had a question prepared, which was, were you somewhat jealous of Gunny being number 2? But actually, it just sounds like you're completely in awe of the man. Like, what was it like? What was it like training with him, and what was he like in the changing room and at half time? What was he really like when he played for Norwich?
Okay, so Bryan, it was a larger than life character, which I think no one will dispute even to this day. Still larger than life. You just got to look at the Inter Milan game a couple of years ago where we played the charity game. His presence and the way he conducted himself, he's a larger than life character. But you're exactly right in what you said, how I felt about him. This was a man that I used to go and stand in the terraces back in the day at Norwich, and you know, from travelling over and go and watch him play. Somebody that I used to watch, I was in complete awe of him, the way he was on the pitch. He's just a monstrosity of a man. And back in them days, because of his height, not because of his physical build, where
we love you,
new life has taken over that. But no, the way he conducted himself and seeing him play in the European games against Inter Milan and Bayern Munich, this was a man that you got to understand as a 10, 11, 12 up to 19 before I got in the first team. This was somebody who I'd only ever dreamed about being in a presence with. So yeah, it's almost meeting your ideal idol.
Wow.
And the way he was with myself was second to none, as I've stated previously.
And so then in 96, 97 now, Gunny was actually dropped and you seized the opportunity. And I think it's fair to say that season you did become a fan favourite at that time. What do you remember of that season? And what do you remember in the early seasons, in like the first time when you started to like break into the Norwich team? What was that like around that era?
It was filled with an element of taking over from a legendary status.
Yeah.
It was big boots to fill, and you're thinking, can I deal with this? Can I cope with it? I also felt guilty, and it sounds bizarre, but you know, I felt guilty that I was taking Bryan's position, and that's something in football you can't ever be. You can't ever feel guilty in any way, because at the end of it, this is a ruthless industry, and it's a very short industry and a very short career that you have in it. And at the end of it, no one cares about you when you're gone. So you've got to take the moment and seize the moment as best as you can do. But Bryan, again, in the way that he was second to none, and he was. And I'm not trying to patronise or sound like I'm trying to oversell this, but he was fantastic towards me. You know, maybe was realising his time was coming to an end at Norwich. Maybe, I don't know. But the way he was with me was phenomenal, and I think that's why we've always had that mutual respect ever since we moved on.
It's so good to hear that. It's honestly so good to hear that. And it's great to hear that you still keep in touch despite your very obvious differences, which we'll get onto in a moment, as well as you quoting that football is a ruthless sport. I'm sure lots of people will be waiting for this big question. However, I'm not going to give it to you yet. In 2001, you actually won the Player of the Season, the Barry Butler Memorial Trophy. That's a massive honour. And at that point, you must have just been absolutely on top of the world and just so happy. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, without a doubt. Norwich was my first club, and it's always held a special place in my heart. And I think the previous year, I think I'd come runner-up or something to the Barry Butler Player of the Season award. I think it was something like that.
Okay.
And so, you know, I'm seeing these great players, and Bryan being one of them previously, win this accolade, and it was something that I wanted to try and achieve. Not really believing you're going to do it, but it's something, you know, you set out try to do by just performing at your best every week. And when I won it was a great honour, and you know, to be voted by the fans, it was fantastic.
Now, Marshy, let's talk about that 2000 to 2001 season and that side. You've obviously said, you know, 𝚑𝚐𝚑 was, you know, one of the best defenders, Matt Jackson as well. But what about Jury? What about Gary Holt, you and Roberts? I mean, what was it like being in amongst that team? Because Norwich City fans now, we look back on that team and they're more or less all legends. What was it like being in the changing room with like massive characters like Three Lungs, Gary Holt, and Jury, then just in the ascendancy of his career? What was that like?
Yeah, I think Adam join us from Peterborough? Was that right?
Yes, he did.
Yeah. And he was just, as you say, he was just in the ascendancy. His career was just about starting taking off. And Ewan Roberts was probably coming into the pinnacle of his career. And Holty, I mean, as you said, the guy just would never stop running. But you know, you say like legends in the game. It wasn't to us. It was just our job. It was our careers, and you know, we never saw either person or anyone as anything above anyone else. And you know, I guess it's only when you finish playing football you look back and you go, Jesus, we had a good time there. We had a good team. We played with some good players, and what we managed to achieve was good. But I think we were always comparing ourselves. There goes my dog. I think we're always comparing ourselves to the legendary side, where Bryan Gunn and the European run. So you're always striving to achieve and become better. But you're right. We did. We had an exceptional side at the time, and you know, yeah, it was an enjoyable and a pleasurable place to be working at anyway.
you had a great side, as you said, Andy, but also you had some great managers. You played under Mike Walker, obviously a legendary Norwich City manager, Bruce Rioch as well. Which manager at Norwich did you most enjoy playing under? Because sometimes players, put bluntly, they just don't like playing under certain managers because they're not played or they don't suit their style. What was the manager at Norwich City that you had a lot of respect for?
I think I've always got to mention John Dean, and the reason why, because John put his faith in me, putting me as the number 2 behind Bryan, and then giving me the opportunity. And again, John is somebody that I've seen quite a few times since we've gone our separate ways from Norwich, and always conducted himself really well, and was a gentleman with the way that he was. But Bruce Rioch, I loved working with. I love working with Bruce. He was a bit of a taskmaster at times, but I think it was from the very first day that I met Bruce. We got a call from the club secretary for a few of the players to come down and be the press launch of the new manager being released, or presented, not released, being presented. So myself and Adrian Forbes went down because I think everyone else was on holiday, and I was there, and I think it had a bit of an impression on Bruce that we went down. I mean, I'll be honest with you, it was nothing really to do with us. I think we were the only 2 players around, so we just went along, because we were asked to by the club. But I think it impressed him. Anyway, that relationship just seemed to evolve really quickly. And the first time I met him, I just went straight up to him, introduced who I was, and just said to him, "I need a goalkeeper coach. You've got to help me get a goalkeeper coach." That was literally the first thing I said to him. And I didn't know how he'd take it. I didn't know if he thought I'd be a bit blasé or what. But I later found out, he said to me, he said that was one of the most impressive things I've heard. He said, you knew what you wanted. You knew what you wanted to achieve. You came up, you told me what you wanted, and we got you one. And it helped develop me, which in turn obviously helped the football club.
So honest of you, Andy, and I'm going to try and scrape some honesty out of you now. Do you look back on your time at Norwich with genuine pride?
Genuine pride and love, honestly, and I mean that. I loved working and playing for that football club. I loved living in the city. My parents asked me this. We have the conversations every now and again, usually after a couple of drinks, and my mum gets emotional and she says, "Oh no, it's my favourite club because it's your first club, and we always come down there." And it was a special place, and you can't help but feel that way about a club that has helped you. I mean, it gave me what I've had in my life, so it's given me the opportunity, and it gave me the springboard to go on and achieve the things that I've done, and become the person that I've become.
That's a hell of an answer, and I really, really appreciate that honesty. And this is why, and I know a lot of Norwich fans now will be screaming at the YouTube channel. They'll be screaming in the parks, the gyms, the bikes, wherever they're listening or watching to this, saying, "Well, what the hell, Chris? How can Andy sit there and say that when this happened?" So it's now 20 minutes into the podcast. Let's not keep you any longer. Let's flesh this out bit by bit with brutal honesty and transparency, and I'm sure you'll do that for me, Marshy. So, is it true that at the end of that 2001 season, the season that you won the Barry Butler Memorial, by the way, you refused to sign a deal with Norwich City? True or false?
Anyway, thanks, Chris. It's been a great interview. Okay, no, the situation was, okay, you can argue I refused to sign a contract. I was offered 3 contracts by Norwich City. The 3 contracts were financially exactly the same, just dressed up a different way.
Right.
So there was no financial difference in any of the 3 contracts that the football club offered me. I've still got the letters from the club. I kept hold of them, just wanted to keep hold of them.
Yeah.
But it was bigger than that, and it really was, Chris. I'd been at the club for 17 years in total, and just got player of the season. And it was the opportunity. I wanted to go and play in the Premier League, and I wanted to go and test myself. And at the time, I'd shown complete loyalty to the football club for many, many years, through dark times, through tough times, and the club has supported me as well. but I'm also realistic. It was time I needed to make a move, and it was maybe time for the club to have somebody different in Robert Green come through.
Yeah,
who did do an exceptional job.
Amazing job. Yeah.
So for myself, it was that right time. Was it the right club in going where I went to? Well, that's another question. But it was definitely the right time for me to move on.
Sure. No, and that makes sense that you would want to play at the highest level possible. And I'm not going to take the words out of your mouth. I'll ask you the next question now. Here it comes. Why did you really leave Norwich for Ipswich? Was there no other offers, Andy?
I think this is where, as transitioning from a player to now being a coach, I'm able to advise the people that I work with maybe a little bit wiser than what I was advised, because as I was being made to understand from the agent that was representing me, that was pretty much the only offer from the Premier League that was forward. So sometimes in football, and particularly when people are representing you, they will, excuse my dog there, they will only give you the truth that they feel that needs to be distributed to yourself. So was it the only offer that I was aware of? Excuse me, I'm just going to get my dog. Look, here he is. Was it the only offer that I was aware of? Yes, it was. And then I had to look at it as a football club, and I had to look at who was there at the football club, and I had to look at what the club was doing and where it had come from. And you've got to say, to be fair, the club was in a good place, Ipswich, and it was in a great place. It was in the Premier League. It just finished really high. Was it going to repeat that? No. Likelihood, no, it wasn't. But it had European football as well. So it was a great opportunity for myself to go and test myself at a higher level and potentially play European football. I mean, anyone would be stupid to turn that down. They really would be.
But yes, but after growing up at Norwich, and I'm sure making friends and obviously family friends, and you've said there that your mum, she like fell in love with the club, that was her boys' club. And then I just want to understand what was going through what was going through your head when you thought, no, you know what, it's I'll crack on and I'll go to Ipswich? Because was there not any thought of, you know what, I just can't go to Ipswich? Or was it honestly just a very matter of fact, they're playing UEFA Cup football and they give me more money?
It becomes very matter of fact. It's a cutthroat industry, Chris. And this is the harsh reality of football. At the end of it, you're paid to do a job, and you want to do that job at the highest level you can possibly do it. And it's a real cutthroat industry. Nobody cares about Andy Marshall, the footballer that was. Nobody cares about me. Not now. They don't. Not in football terms, and they don't. I'm now a coach, okay, and that's my next step. And I express this to the people that I work with. We work in the best industry in the world. It is the best industry, but it is the most ruthless and cutthroat industry in the world, and it is. And the reason why it is because it builds you up to something that will then chop it away from you within a second. And your lifestyle, your livelihood, everything that goes with it can be gone very, very quickly. So you have to be very cutthroat as a human being to understand what your priorities in life are. And your priorities will always be first, second, and third, my family. And it always will be.
Of course.
And the love that I have for what I do is second to none. And I'm very, very lucky with what I do. I'm very lucky in the industry that I work with, in the people that I work with. But I'm not also naive enough to understand and not realize how ruthless this industry is. Because it is. And I've seen many, many better people than me in football, as in the careers that they have, get brushed aside out of this job.
No, and I respect that, mate. Was there also an element of Greenos over your shoulder, and was there a thought in your head of, actually, I might lose my spot?
No, not at all. I didn't think of it that way. When Robert was there, again, the similar scenario that I had with Bryan, I then became the mentor to Robert to a certain extent. And I enjoyed taking that mantle on. And the club were offering Robert, and it's maybe wrong for me to talk about Robert's contractual situation, but they offered him a new contract when I was still there. and he wasn't going to sign it because he wasn't sure what was going on with me, and he wanted to go to the next step and start playing.
Wow.
So I actually told Greeny, when I knew that I wasn't going to be staying, that I was going to be moving on and he should sign the contract.
Wow.
So I made it very clear to Robert, and you know, that whatever goes on beyond that is with Robert. But I had that relationship with him that I wanted to make it clear for the right of his career that I would be moving on.
And fair play, because Greeno's stayed at Norwich and was extremely successful. Did you realise just how badly that move would? Because I'm going to positively challenge you here, Andy. You said no one cares about Andy Marshall. I would disagree with that. I think that Norwich fans care immensely about people that have represented their club, but most importantly, they care immensely about players that have won the Player of the Season. You know, yeah. they're legends. And so, did you realise that you were going to burn the bridge? And you, because I love your attitude, by the way, and I respect it. You prioritise your family, you're cutthroat, you make a decision to play at the highest level whilst you've got it. I get that, but there's got to be a little seed of doubt in your mind, of emotion, of thought, oh my God, I'm about to literally have 26,000 people after me with pitchforks.
Yeah, I think you've got to view it this way, okay? I spent 17 years building a career at a club that I loved, that gave me a lot, and I gave them everything, and I was going to burn them bridges. So to answer your question, I think I've just answered it there, that literally all them 17 years could have gone to waste. So I was perfectly aware that I was going to be seen as the ogre, and I was going to be seen as the Judas, as they called me at the time. But at the end of it, I will always prioritize my family, and I wanted to try and extend my career to a higher level, and that was the right thing for me to do.
No, I love it, and I love that you're getting heated, and this is actually making me feel slightly uncomfortable. I knew it would, Andy, but you know, honestly now, and I'm going to maybe going to get you in trouble with Ipswich fans. If there was another club at that level, because like, do you regret leaving Norwich to go to Ipswich? Like, there's not a single regret.
It's okay. So when I made the move, I mentioned earlier about how Ipswich was set up with the staff and everything like that.
You did.
What fans might not have realised was the goalkeeping coach at Ipswich was actually half the time working at Norwich. He was half the time working at Norwich, half the time working at Ipswich. Inside information, huh? So this was back in the day when no clubs had full-time goalkeeper coaches. Wow. So yeah, it sounds bizarre. We went from the era where Bryan was playing and I was the number 2 of no goalkeeper coaches, and this was like the transition period between the period where myself and Robert Green were coming through. And the gentleman worked half the time at Norwich, 2 days a week, and 2 days a week at Ipswich. And at the same time, I was was given the offer to go to Ipswich. He was then going full time to Ipswich Town. So this is a man who really sort of kicked my career on and made me understand goalkeeping and made me understand football. And he was the one where, if you were to actually analyze my career through that 3 or 4 years, I was working with him the whole time, well, 2 days a week. And that's where my career really escalated and really took off. So I saw that as the opportunity to go there and really kick myself on and go to the next level, working with him at a Premier League football club.
No, I appreciate your honesty, and I must admit, as I said, I'm a bit hot under the collar. It's slightly uncomfortable, but I feel like I need to challenge you for all of the Norwich fans that are still angry. And one of the things that I'm angry, I wasn't there as a fan at that time, but I know a lot of people that were, and they're furious about this to this day, Andy. You come back to Norwich as the Ipswich goalkeeper. That was back in the day when they actually beat us a couple of times, which is a miracle. But you celebrated, and you didn't just celebrate, you went berserk. Explain that day, and what was going through your head? Was it like you wanted to prove a point because of all of the haters? What was it?
Okay, so it was 18 months of stick, hatred, whatever that I'd received. You know, there was a lot made of me going back to the football club. how it was going to be. I remember from the moment that the coach arrived at the stadium, Joe Royle was the manager, and there was thousands of fans there, and they were baying for blood, and they were, and you know, and Joe stood up, and we were all there. No one could believe how many fans were outside. They were going mad, and Joe just stood up and looked around at me and went, "Marsh, they're not here for the rest of us. Go on, off you go." So, you know, there was a line of police there to take us out and take me to the stadium. And then when I've gone out to warm up, you know, the area behind the goal, the stand and everything, it was full. It was full of fans. And this is an hour before kickoff, and that never happens, to watch the goalie warm up. And every single ball I was catching, kicking, it was, you know, the boos, the chants, the everything. So I'd taken a lot of stick and I hadn't said a word. And I let my football do the talking. And then to win the game, it was a release. It was a release, and it wasn't aimed at the Norwich fans. It was a release for me to go, yes, see, I proved it. So, yeah, that's what it was, and it was as simple as that, Chris.
It's just no, and I appreciate that again, and it must have just been such a crazy, hot-headed like few hours in your life. And you say, like, obviously Norwich fans giving you stick, you know, if I was there, I would have been giving you stick, because if you go to Ipswich, for me it's over. It's the same with Paul Lambert, right? But I appreciate your honesty. I really do. I really respect that. But we'll see in the comments if other people still feel the same way. Andy, when you look back at your career, what is the moment that you go, you know what, that is the proudest moment? I've
been fortunate, Chris, that I played in quite a few big games. And this might sound a little bit silly, but I was fortunate. I played in the FA Cup final, and at the time I thought that was one of the biggest things you can ever achieve, and it was one of the biggest dreams that I ever wanted to achieve. But I'm going to take myself out of my football career, and I'm going to go into my coaching one, because one of my biggest achievements, and I felt so proud, was our goalkeeper at the time was Dylan Phillips, and Dylan at Charlton was a long way from where he needed to be. And I spent 12 months working on this young lad and developing him. And he played in the playoff final after saving a penalty in the semi-final against Doncaster. And he made the biggest rick you could ever make in the playoff final, which put us 1-0 down. And to see what he'd gone through for the whole season after playing, being dropped, getting back in the side, working. And all these elements that he'd been working on all season, that I've been working with him and trying to explain what was going to happen if you didn't do X, Y, and Z, they all came to fruition in this one game where he made this drastic mistake with that similar sort of situation that we'd worked on in training. And how he came back, he made a great save 10 minutes later, and it turned the game, and we got back into the game, and we won it with 6 seconds to go. And the jubilation of seeing that, it was very emotional for myself. Yeah. And I know it had a big impact on him and his family. And these, you know, I've a lot of contact with him and his family still, even though he's moved on to Cardiff, because it's propelled his career and it gave him a platform. And then to see him get player of the season last season for us, for me, as much as I love my career, and you can never beat playing, that felt like his biggest single achievement, because it was almost something that I could do for my son, because I almost nurtured him as my son. Wow,
that's a big statement, because you played for some big clubs, signed for some big clubs, you know, and that is massive. And actually that leads me nicely on to the next one, Andy, which is in 2014 when you obviously hung your gloves up. That was it. I can already get the impression from you that you were just so ready to go into coaching. Was that the case? And how is it going at Charlton? Because it seems like you're just absolutely loving that role as a coach.
So I was very fortunate that when I moved to Aston Villa and I was doing still playing, I played there for 4 years. But in that time, I was starting to take on coaching roles within the 23s and the academy. So it was actually, ironically, Paul Lambert released me as a player. who's now at Ipswich.
I told you. I told you about Paul Lambert, mate.
Yeah, but Chris, here you go. Here's the cherry on the top. Then 6 months later, he brings me back as goalkeeper coach. So, yeah, so it was him who gave me my first opportunity in coaching. But I'd already had the platform and the bedding for it. And I spent another 3 years though, at Villa, and it gave me a real insight on how a proper professional football club needs to be run as a coach. Because, you know, at the other clubs I've been at, I'd only ever been a player. So you're starting at one of the highest clubs as a coach, and it was phenomenal. And it really gave me that footing for. I left Aston Villa and I had 6 months out, and when 𝚋𝚘𝚑𝚎 called me, who I knew from years ago, it really set me in good stead to kick on and take everything that I'd learned from what would be at the time a top Premier League football side and Cat 1 football club in the academy, and help start to implement them things into Charlton. And I came into a club, I'll be honest with you, that was a mess.
Yeah, sure.
And it was a mess. And Lee was coming in, and Lee knew it was a mess. We had ownership issues, and the owner was stopping investing. And
yeah,
I'll be honest with you, there was myself, Lee Bowyer, Johnny Jackson, and Steve Gallen. And it was us that was basically running the football club from top to bottom.
Wow.
There was some really good people there, but were given no direction. No one was able to do anything. And so, you know, that season, we galvanized a team. We created a team. The recruitment was fantastic by Steve Gallen. And, you know, we were able to get the football club promoted against all odds. And it was against all odds. And the irony is that we got promoted to the Championship, and the owner actually cut our budget because he was trying to sell the football club. And so we had a lesser budget within the Championship. We were losing staff. And just before Christmas, we were sitting second in the table in the Championship. Injuries took its toll, and the inevitable happened, and we ended up getting relegated. So, but to answer your question, I'm loving it. I'm absolutely loving it. I'm working with a manager who's very knowledgeable. He's got an exceptional knowledge of the game and understanding of it. We've now got a new owner here who's financially backing the football club and rebuilding the football club, and we're getting staff in. And this is a club that can go places. It really can do. And I do. And I had this conversation not so long ago. It is a very, very similar football club to Norwich. It really is very similar. The similar size of the stature of the club, how it's run, how it should be run how Norwich is run. It's a very, very similar club.
That must be why you love it so much, Andy, because it's like Norwich. And I'm now going to ask you something, and I want you to be honest. What do you think?
I think I've been that, Chris.
Yeah, you absolutely have, mate. And I'm going to keep ruling it out of you. Looking at the two obvious clubs that we're going to talk about here, Norwich and Ipswich, what has gone so wrong at Ipswich over the last few seasons for them to be where they are, and for us to have managed to get to the Prem? Because Ipswich have just fallen apart. And it, for you, is there a dilemma of like, because obviously you clearly still love Norwich, it still clearly holds a place in your heart still, but you played for Ipswich, and what do you think's happened there between the two clubs? Because Ipswich, when you moved to them, that was like their heyday, like that was the big time, and now what's happened?
I think it's maybe slightly wrong of me to speak about the ownership issues within Ipswich, but I can definitely talk about them at Norwich. And you look at how the structure of the football club was done, and when Delia and Michael Wynne-Jones came in, the passion they got for the football club of trying to do the right things. But I remember the time at Norwich where gates were down, the football club was in a bad place, and they brought in the right people. They rebuilt the football club. They got the fans in. The biggest things were doing the kid for a quid thing, looking for the future. And I remember that clearly. And all them kids that were coming for a quid. And I remember the stadium being practically full, but half of them being young kids. Well, they're now full-time hardened Norwich supporters. Yeah. And now you're getting 27, 28,000 fans every week, whatever league you're in. If you went down to League One, I bet you'd bloody be the same as well.
Yeah, we did. Yeah.
So, and I look at the Ipswich situation, and 𝚱𝚑𝚎𝚒𝚗𝚒𝚗𝚒, when I was there, again, a very passionate man and loved Ipswich town. But But when David left and Marcus Evans has come in, I'm not sure you've got that same connection, the way that David was and the way that Delia and Michael Wynne-Jones are. I don't know Marcus Evans, so I might be talking out of turn here. But from the outside, that's how I view it. And I look at the infrastructure that Norwich has been doing and Ipswich were doing, and they were both very, very similar. But when Ipswich dropped out of the Premier League, the investment that they had into the players financially was too much. And they were never able to recoup that. So they were always chasing their tails. Norwich, whatever league they will probably go into, will always financially be in a stable position. So it seems Ipswich are going to be chasing their tails for many years to come, without huge investment into the football club. Where I look at Norwich and they seem to have a model, and it's a model that works. And at the moment, I'm not sure what Ipswich's model is.
Yeah, no, that's completely fair, and I think you're right in saying that. I think it's obvious that Marcus Evans doesn't care, and I think and it's very admirable of you to praise Delia. I think you're totally bang on the money there, Andy. I really do. Right, we're coming to the end now. There are thousands of Norwich fans watching and listening to this. Do you have a message for them at all?
No, listen. If we're coming to the end, I want to say this. I thoroughly love my time at Norwich, and the support that I had from the football club. And I've got to say this: when I went back 2 years ago for the Inter Milan game, the charity,
they still booed you.
They still booed me when I went on. But I will say this: at the end of it, they are actually admiring it. I don't know if admiring is the right word, but they clapped me, okay,
yeah.
And they didn't boo me at the end. And I think there was an element of fair dues. You've come back, you've taken it, and it's the only time I've ever come back to the football club, and I'd only do it for a charity, and that was the reason why. And the time I had at the club, I thoroughly enjoyed, and I think every single game, one thing you'll say about me, I gave everything on every game, whether my performances were good, bad, or indifferent. I gave everything, and if there was a mistake, it was an honest mistake. But I want to thank the fans for the time that I had there. And I want to thank them for the grief that they give me every time I've gone back. And I can't wait to the time that I can go back there as a Premier League coach, playing a Premier League game against Norwich City, because that will be something I really enjoy.
Hopefully you don't come on the pitch and go crazy and celebrate again.
I will definitely be doing that if we win.
Andy, thank you so much for coming on. That's it. And thank you so much to everyone that's watching and listening to this right now around the world. We really appreciate the support. If you've enjoyed this today, give it a thumbs up on YouTube, give it a like, share on Facebook, retweet on Twitter, comment, whatever. That's great. Make sure you give us a tweet as well if you've enjoyed it. We're always interested in taking on board your feedback. Andy, there is only one thing left to say. What is that?
On the ball, see.
Yes! I've completed it. Cheers, Andy.